Well, good morning, my brothers and sisters. It is a real joy and an honor to stand with you, my family, and to talk about the Word of God, to talk about who Jesus is and what he has done. If you don't know, if I haven't met you, I am Pastor Steb, and it is my privilege to speak with you today. Well, this morning, I want to talk about something. Many of you know I'm a dork. I'm the guy who watched Star Trek every day when I was a kid, loved Star Wars, loved Lord of the Rings. I was the guy who watched Discovery Channel, the History Channel, how it's made. I could watch that for hours. So it may not surprise you that I'm going to come to you with a question. And here's my question. What is a word? Does that sound strangely philosophical? What's the nature of is? What's the nature of words? What's the nature of truth? Well, I think it's informative for us today to talk about the nature of word because Jesus himself is called Word. The texts themselves are called the Word of God, and I think there may be some good fruit for us as a church to explore it. So let's start at the beginning. What is word? Well, it's an interesting question to ask. And if I was to start at the beginning, I think I might even start with something like vibrations, right? You know, you put your fingers up to your throat while you're talking. You know, the deeper the register of your voice, the more you'll feel it, but you can feel it vibrating. There's something about the human vocal cords that move back and forth. It's kind of like magic. And that propels words and sounds and information out of your mouth, and it goes into someone's eardrum, the little flap of skin that moves. I mean, it's incredible if you think about it. You know how hard it'd be to make something like that? So there's vibrations. But we can't stop there because vibrations would lead me to something like this. Does anybody know what this is? I was reaching for a tuning fork, but I realized I don't have one, but I have something better. This is called a wah-wah tube. And it's as fun as the name sounds, all right? Now, bonus points. Does anybody in here have an ear tuned enough that can tell me what key that's in? Anybody? Yeah, here, let me hit it again so you can hear it. It's okay if no one can. G? C. It's a C, right? Now, I couldn't do that, so don't think that I'm standing over you. I can hear percussion, I can hear beats and rhythms, I hear no notes or anything. That's a foreign language to me, no matter how hard I try. So, words themselves, it can't just be vibration because that's vibration, but that's not a word. It's beautiful, it's tuned well, it hits something specific and it has a function in music, but that can't be all that it is. So there's something more than just the vibrations of your vocal cords. There has to be something a little bit more of a pattern. Right? Is that fair to say? Words are vibration, but it's also a pattern to it because that is a pattern, but it's a very flat pattern. Words are a little bit more complex. There's a movement of a pattern. Okay, well, it of course has to be more than that because I could put 3 of these wah-wah tubes together and hit them in sequence and I've made a pattern, yet I have not made words. So then I would go, well, okay, well then let's go back to the throat and let's say vocalization. Your vocal cords are putting out a rhythm, vibrations in a particular pattern, and it's vocalized. Well, that can't be it either because I could vocalize all kinds of things with my throat, and you may not call them words. Have you ever had a small infant, small child? Have you ever had a large child? I don't know. Sometimes it's just the same. I think there's probably something about the nature of word. Again, this is weird to talk about, like what is the nature of it? There's something about the nature that has to do with meaning, right? Because just because you get a couple things together doesn't mean there's meaning. A squirrel could climb a tree with a couple of nuts and throw them off and they hit in certain ways, and if you record it, you go, oh, that's a pattern. That's really interesting. I can see the way that, well, that's interesting, but that's not a word unless the squirrel is super squirrel and they're communicating. But see, it's more than just meaning because you have learned to recognize a certain type of vibration and a certain type of pattern that goes into your eardrums and it communicates something. So I can say that I can hear the note of C, but I can also say that is the note of C. I can use words to describe it and I come to the same reality. Do you see the point? So it's a vocalization. But we can't stop there because we all know that word isn't confined to the vocal cord. Word is also capable of being expressed in print. You could have a chisel, you could have a pen, you could have a marker, and you could write letters that your eyes then pick up and you recognize them as a word. I could now write key of C up on the board and all of you would know what I'm talking about. So it's certainly vibrations, it's certainly meaning and patterns, it's certainly human speech coming from your vocal cords out of your mouth into your eardrums. So it's not less than that, but it's more than that, because if I can visually see it and know what it is, well, then I know it transcends just vocalization. Because if you can read, you can intake words. So now we have words transmitting at the speed of sound through the air, but we also have words transmitting at the speed of light from the page to your eye. Okay, words. But let's go a step further. Some of you may have had friends that are visually impaired, and you can't see. So how do they learn to read? Braille. Has anybody ever picked up a piece of Braille and rubbed your hand across it? Don't tell me that when you're out in public, like at Disney World or at Cedar Point, and there's a sign up there that has words and has Braille, that you don't want to rub your finger across it. Don't tell me I'm the only one. I have no idea what it says, and somebody has figured out, can organize these bumps in a certain way that when you rub your thumb across it, or your finger, forgive me, it's probably not your thumb, rub your finger across it, you're going to receive words. Okay, well, it's no longer confined just to vibrations in the air, moving that way. It's also not confined to light travel. Now it's sensation. It's literally electrical impulses traveling through your fingers, and word is communicated. Do you guys see how complex this question is? But here's the deal. We just went from ears to eyes to touch. You know that there's two more senses, right? Now, I'm not aware of it, but I don't think there's any way to communicate through smell, is there? That would be weird. But let me tell you right now, if any of one of you want to figure out how to communicate through taste, sign me up. When you can bake the chocolate chip cookie that communicates a profound poem that moves me to tears while I'm eating the cookie, you're my hero. Don't tell me this would be incredible. I feel like you got to have all five senses. But see, then it's not just confined to senses, because you can hold a word in your head, right? It doesn't actually have to be received. It can be an idea that's held in your head. Now, you can feel, you musicians know what I'm talking about, you can feel the note of C in your head. You can think about the note of C as a concept. You can even start to sub-vocalize. You know what that is? You want to know what it is? You know when you are angry at somebody and you're having an argument in your head, but there's people around, you can't say it out loud? And so, you know what I'm talking about. It's almost like you feel it in the top back of your throat, and you're saying it, but you're not actually making any noise. It's called sub-vocalizing. You can hold these things in your head. So whatever word is transcends all of those, but it certainly includes them. Then let's go a step further. What is a word other than something that you have received from someone else? Who taught you the English language or the Spanish language? Who taught you to read Braille? Someone else did. Words are by definition based off communication, based off relationship. There's something deeply communal about language itself. See, for me, that's all interesting. Yet, that doesn't quite get to the core of what is word. Specifically, if you've spent time reading the New Testament, because it uses the word word all the time, but it means something different. So, let's spend some time in the book of John. We're going to do in John chapter 1. When you have a big letter Bible, there's 4 pages for every chapter. It takes a while to turn there. We're going to do in John chapter 1. Now, I realize that many of you are probably familiar with this passage. You've probably heard it, if you've been in the church, preached on dozens of times, okay? But my contention is I want to read through these first couple verses here, and I want to see what is this word, because it starts right off talking about word. And I think whatever this is, whatever the question about what is the nature of word, even if that could mean chocolate chip cookies that communicate poetry, whatever that is, there's something deeper and more profound that has to do with Jesus himself. So let's pick up in John chapter 1, verse 1. Let's read through the whole thing, and then we'll come back and do some highlights and overviews. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of a man, but of God. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. The word of the Lord for us. See, my contention here is I want to know, what is this idea of word? What's the deeper truth that's going on here? So let's just run through the passage, and then let's come back to the idea of word. So it opens up, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Now, notice that the word word is capitalized. Let's come back to that. There's something unique there. Whatever word is has to do with creation. Now, when you read the phrase in the beginning of John, in the beginning, the Jewish Christian John, who grew up on the Old Testament scriptures, when he puts the phrase, in the beginning, you are obligated, you're meant to go back to, where else did I hear in the beginning? You go back to Genesis, all the way back to Genesis 1, where it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But this is a different flavor, because now we have a different understanding of what word is. Because God's creating all things, the Spirit is hovering over the water, and how does he begin to create? He speaks. He says, let there be light. And light came into existence. Let there be trees, let there be stars, let there be a divide in the water. He speaks and speaks and speaks, and this happens. But it's interesting because John now reveals something about that story that we didn't know before. That when the Father spoke, let there be light, it was not a vocalization that came out into what? I mean, did God have vocal cords? Was there atmosphere for it to vibrate into? When God spoke, the Son, the one true Word of God, came forth from the Father. What was the word, let there be light? It was Jesus himself, the Son of God, that went forth. And where Jesus went, light happened. Where Jesus went, the waters were divided. Jesus himself is the Word. It's God speaking into the void, into the darkness. All things were made through him. Without him was nothing made that was made. In him was life. So the idea of life comes from Jesus. When God is speaking life into the world, the thing coming from the Father is the Son. It is a relational sending of the second member of the Trinity into the darkness. This is profound. These aren't just words that are being spoken. This is the Son himself being sent forth into the darkness. We move on, and then we go through the John coming as a witness to this light. We move into verse 9. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came into his own, and his own people did not receive him. Now we get this interesting idea that gets introduced here. It's not just that there is this power, this creative force of the Word coming into the darkness and creation happens. Now there's an idea of counterword, falsity, something in opposition. The very definition of Word, of creation, the one who had all the power and all the authority to make all things, that Word spoken into creation that vibrated this kind of love and life of God into the void, is rejected. It's capable of being rejected. That's a dark turn in the story. But to everyone who received him, who believed in his name, he gave right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of man, nor the will of the flesh, but of God. We see that when God speaks, not just life happens, but new life happens. New creation, new birth happens. Whatever the counter word is, whatever the falsity is, it can be undone by the same word that created the possibility for word in the first place. And then in verse 14, we come back to using the word again. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Now, you've probably heard this before, but when the Word became flesh, this is the Son of God, the very personality that came from the Father into the void that burst all life and creation, existence itself came into existence. Again, how do we even describe it? Can you use the word to describe itself? Well, I don't know how else to do it. That very Word took on human flesh, embodied himself in the person of Jesus. And there's this word dwelt among us. It's literally the word tabernacle. Again, many of you have probably heard this before, that not only did he take on flesh, he tabernacled, meaning the tabernacle, the old place of worship where God's hot spot of his presence was most tightly and hugely, I'm literally losing my words, so I'm going to use funny words. I'm going to use the word hugely located. That is where God was. That type of hot presence of God is now located specifically in a person, not in a place, but in a person. The incarnated Word of God in Jesus. And then what does it say after that? And we have seen his glory, the glory as the only Son from the Father, full of grace. And once again, we come back to the Son coming from the Father. But now that we've run through the passage, let me come back to the word because it's capitalized. Usually when you capitalize a word, even if you capitalize the word, you're usually talking about a proper noun, a name, a place. So it's not just the idea of word, we're getting at the very substance of it. Now, the Greek word here specifically is logos. You guys heard this word before? You might say logos. I've heard lots of people pronounce it. Let's go with logos. Now, John is a Jew, but he is living in a Greek world. And when he uses this word logos, he knows exactly what his readers are going to read. You see, the Greek and Roman philosophers for centuries had begun to develop a way of thinking and a desire for knowledge that wasn't really seen in the world before. We're talking about guys like Plato and Socrates, Aristotle. And they were trying to think deeply about the world. And I applaud that. Who wouldn't? Let's think deeply about the world. Let's find out what's true, and let's line ourselves up with what's true. Is that not a good impulse? Well, these men over the centuries, as they're thinking about it, with all the flaws that they had and all the bad assumptions about thinking and truth that they had in there, even then, they came down to this idea that they didn't know what else to call it other than word. And they call it logos. They realized that if you could figure out what the logos is, that's your answer to everything. If you knew what logos was, if you could understand it, you could look at any other question in life and know what the answer was. Because there seemed to be something at the core. And I go, wow, you did this and not following the scriptures and not following Christ, and you came to that conclusion? That's incredible. We should applaud them to get there. But for them, their idea of logos was this idea of like one rational organizing principle of the world. Okay? This kind of sounds like, if you read cosmology, the grand unifying theory. Has anyone ever heard this phrase? in the last 50, 70 years. Cosmologists are trying to figure out what is the one formula or theory that I can develop that will explain everything else. Things like string theory, multiverse theory. These are genuine attempts to try to get at the very core essence of reality. Good on you. But John, when he's writing, takes that very good human impulse to say, what is the main thing about reality, and says, the Logos. In the beginning, let me read this first couple verses. In the beginning was the Logos. You know, that one thing you're looking for? And the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. He in the beginning was with God, and all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life and the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The one thing that you're looking for, the thing that is the answer to all questions before the question's even asked, that is the Logos, that is the Word, the Son who has emanated forth from the Father. Okay, great. Let's step back. What is word? We talked about vocalization. We talked about vibration. We talked about meaning and this relationality. Well, now we're getting deeper into what is word. Well, in the text we see several things, that there is this idea of will and intention. Whatever word is, specifically the word, the Logos, this word has purpose. It has direction. It has the